And welcome to another episode of Watch Science. I am Michael Michaels, and we are still talking about the CH27, the Omega 321. Before I go into that, I want to touch a couple questions that came in over the last couple weeks from some viewers. And one of them had to do with the other manual wind chronographs. People are looking to purchase manual wind chronographs, which I love. Again, I'm a big fan of manual winds for the thinness, everything else. There are some very good manual wind chronographs that are on the market. And the first one that comes to mind is, I know I've talked about the El Primero before. There is an El Primero hand wind. It's a very thin movement. It's actually, we worked on one the other day. It's a very clean application. It's really nice and really a good value for the money. We actually have a couple of them right now up on our website. They're fantastic watches. So the El Primero is one of my big favorites, no matter if it's an automatic or a manual wind. Other ones, the Breitling B01 in a manual wind. That is a model that's not as popular because of the manual wind, but it's a good watch. And what I like about it is it takes away all the automatic issues that may or may not still be present in the watches. And speaking of the Breitling B01, I have a special announcement to make on our next episode of Watch Science. We will have a special guest in-house, Robert Flood from Breitling, USA. He's a technical instructor, and he's going to give us a deep inside look at the B01 chronograph movements, variations, and he's going to help us out a lot. So I'm really looking forward to myself learning more about the B01 and finding out just how they've fixed the watch through the different incarnations. So we're really going to be looking forward to the next show and having Robert here. With that, some of the other questions we've had, I had a question come in too about how do we do satin finishes on parts, on bridges and stuff, not case parts, but actual movement parts. How do you refinish the brush finish on movement parts? There's a bunch of different ways to do this. And one of the ways that I really, really like is, and I'm trying to find it here, I just named everything and I'm trying to find it, so bear with me 1 second, is right here, and it's a Crytek wheel. And what I use here, these are Crytek wheels, and the wheels, you see it right here, it's a half a wheel. It's not a straight wheel. All I did with this was I took a razor blade and I cut it straight across. I make a nice sharp edge on right over here. I'll make a really nice sharp edge. And what I'll do with that is every time I cut something down, I trim something down, it takes some of that sharp edge of the Crytek away. So I'll just keep continually cutting wedges off of this. And it'll get smaller and smaller. The pieces last forever. But that way it keeps a very sharp edge and you get a very flat profile on it. So just to continue on with it, clear, and there we go. We're just going to refinish just the top half of the bridge. And again, this part's going to be washed after this. This is an abrasive, so there is going to leave some residue. This part is going to be rewashed. And then once it's done, you just get a really nice satin finish across the top of the bridge. It turns out beautiful. And I'll use this a lot of different places when I'm doing any kind of high-end overhauls, depending, again, on the grit and what I need to use. This is a very coarse grit. And so it's what I use. So let me just continue on 1 second, and we'll kind of show here. We're blowing it off here just to check the finish. Once I'm happy with the finish, then I'll go ahead, and run it through the cleaning again. So that's people ask that question. That's what we do there. I want to say a special hello from Jeff from Toronto, Scott Bishop, Alexi, JBO Surf, and everyone else that decided to tune in tonight. I can't thank you enough. The show wouldn't be anything without the people that tune in. So with that, cheers. Love my doers. Beginning the assembly of the CH27, there is a lot is in common with the Omega 1861 and the 861, but there's a lot of things that aren't. One of the things that is pretty much the same, and we touched a little bit on this, is the barrel bridge, or the barrel itself, the barrel and the drive. This is showing right here. This is actually the drive pinion, and it's not much different than on a 7750, the drive pinion that actually drives the hour recorder. And up on top here, you can actually see the parts and this strange-looking double figure 8 plate underneath it actually retains everything down, and it's just held in by two minuscule little screws. And so what I wanted to show with that, though, is the actual barrel assembly, and you see the picture of it, but these are actually the parts. So those are the screws. This is actually coming apart. Just to kind of show, I'm trying to give a quick little demonstration here. These are all the parts here. We have the screws, which are right here, and they are, as we refer to, fly shit. It's right there. They're the tiniest screws. As I was learning watchmaking, this was one of the things I was most terrified of, was losing these little screws, and now I don't even give it a second thought. The screws are there. You're always going to be there. You put them in the cleaning baskets. You don't have to worry about stuff. But what this does is those screws, in turn, hold down this plate here, which puts tension on this pinion, and this pinion is what drives the hour recorder. It's a friction fit on top of the barrel, and you can see the two little holes on there where the screws go. So I just wanted to kind of demonstrate that. We talk about these different parts, we talk about how they go together and their functions, but unless you actually see them apart sometimes, you can't really get a good idea as to how these work. Let's see how far I went on here. I'm putting this back together now, so you'll actually get to see it, and just how the pieces sit in together. And I'm trying to actually demonstrate. I take that back. I'm trying to demonstrate where the notches are inside here. We have little notches right along the barrel here, and it's just a friction with this wheel. And with that, we're going to go back into the actual assembly, and the assembly of the watch. What we're going to do today is we're going to show the assembly of the movement itself. We're not going to focus on the chronograph parts, because that's a whole nother thing, especially with the CH27. We have so many eccentrics, we have so many different adjustments that we have to make in that watch. It's not just throw it together. There's more than one or two little cams. There's a lot of fine adjustments we're going to do under a microscope and everything else. So in a later episode, I want to go ahead and really dissect that down as we put that back together and actually take things out of adjustment to show how they go back into adjustment the correct way, the correct depth thing to show the interaction between the two parts. So that's going to be really exciting when we get to do that. Going into that, we're going to start with the assembly of it, and we have to start with the setting parts. And one thing I did ahead of time here is I have this bridge right here is in place. And this bridge is it holds the hour recorder, which is being shown right here, but it also supports the barrel bridge. So this bridge has to be in place. You can't put the barrel in without it. There's no point in it. Because the barrel's just going to support, and then you're actually fighting it trying to get the bridge back in. The other part that's underneath this bridge is we are looking at the hammer right here. And this is the hammer that actually resets the hour recorder. So those are the parts that come into play before any other assembly begins. While I'm on this side, though, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put the setting parts in, because because we have a 3/4 bridge and our ratchet wheel's buried underneath, I have to be able to turn the winding components to actually get everything to mesh together. Otherwise, I'm going to be chasing parts everywhere, just trying to get the ratchet wheel to lock in with the click spring itself. So with that, we'll continue on, and we'll isolate. Let's isolate some of the parts right here. We have the winding stem right here, and then we have the winding pinion, which is right here. The winding pinion actually engages with the ratchet wheel on the barrel. So this is how we put the power to the watch. When you're actually winding the watch and you feel that ratcheting, you hear that clicking, what that is, that's the interaction between the winding pinion and the sliding pinion or clutch wheel. And it has a rough tooth where it's only going to wind one way, it'll skip one way and catch the other way. So when you're winding your watch, if you go anti-clockwise, it's a very light wind, but you still hear it clicking. That's because it's going against the grain, let's call it. When you go to wind it, those teeth lock together. So it's a one-way clutch. And pressure is held on there by the clutch lever, which we'll get to in a little bit. So we're going to go ahead, and the lubrication I'm going to use on here, even though this is a 50-year-old watch, we're going to use 21st century lubricants on this. This is Blue Gizmo. It's a great setting lubricant. A lot of the brands are going to this. They got away from the Molycot DX. Molycot was actually starting to just cloud up the different cleaning solutions. And for brands that went through a lot, I think actually Breitling, speaking of them earlier, was one of the first brands to actually go away from DX, but we can confirm that on the next episode. But we're showing the different parts here and actually how they go together. The sliding pinion itself actually does slide in and out on the stem. So we have to make sure that as we're putting this together, we have good lubrication on the squares, because the inside of this pinion is a square as well. So it actually catches. When it's in a winding mode, it allows, when the stem turns, the clutch wheel actually imparts power to the winding pinion. And it's actually through pressure. They're held together by pressure. When it's in the setting position or you're in the run position, we want to go ahead and disconnect everything, decouple everything. So what we'll do is the clutch wheel itself will actually stay in place in a run position, but if you go into a set position, the winding pinion will decouple and it just floats. I have a question from Thin Lizzy. How do I know if it's an original manufacturer part in a movement? The quality. The first thing we look at is the quality. Any kind of aftermarket parts, they won't have the finish. We see a lot of this in Rolex. When Rolex comes in, if we buy a Rolex or we're trying to evaluate a Rolex, we want to make sure they have all genuine parts in there. Because the parts are not available to everybody, and unless you have a Rolex account, unless you're Rolex certified, and you've passed all the criteria, and it's not easy to get the Rolex accounts, especially now. Once you have that, you can get the parts. If you don't have it, you have to rely on generic parts, or people do rely on generic parts, I should say. They don't have the same quality. You see it in the finish. You could see it in the finish, just in the finish of a wheel. That's a great question. I think I'll get some pictures next time of some aftermarket parts, because I keep a store pile of them. And anytime I come across one, of course, we take that out and we put a genuine in. So what I look for is the finish on the wheels, the finish on the screws, the finish on the springs. And because if someone's going to replace something, they're not going to go through the trouble to actually refinish a wheel the proper way. Sticking with Rolex, Rolex wheels are all spun. They have a beautiful finish on them. The generics never do. They're always a stamped part, and they look like a stamped part. That's the easiest way. There's not trademarks on everything, so unless it comes in a brand new package, it's very difficult to tell on a lot of other parts. Mainsprings, it's almost impossible to tell unless it comes out of a genuine parts package, be it Omega, be it Rolex or any other brand. Unless it comes out of a parts package, we have no way of telling. So I hope that helps. Again, I'll try to get a couple questions on that, or a couple pictures on that. Be able to bring them in, but that is a great question, and I really appreciate that one coming in. I'm going to continue back on here. And again, if anybody has any questions while we're live, and we are live, please feel free to just shoot them on in, and I'll do my best to answer them on the fly. As you can see, I'm using the Blue Gizmo here, and the quantities that I'm putting on are so unbelievably light. Because what happens is everything spreads as it's inside the watch, and it's the functions working inside the watch. Having too much lubricant as you wind the watch, you have too much lubricant in the setting, all those lubricants are going to travel other places. The idea of putting just enough lubricant in is so it stays in the right place. And that's the key. You put the lubricants where you want them, and they're going to stay where they are. And you'll notice here, when we tore this watch down, this winding stem right here does have some corrosion on it. We are going to replace this. I do have a new one. I'm using this just for reassembly because I don't have the stem on it, or I don't have the crown on it. And just for winding purposes, I have this one on. I know we kind of addressed that last time. I wanted to make sure everything's getting changed on this watch. This is a restoration. So I'm putting the winding parts in here. There's one major difference that I'm going to try to show between the 861, 1861, and the 321 that we're doing right here. And if I can get to it, and I think it's actually in the next video that we're going to open up in just a second, and it's going to be this one right here. It's going to be in the setting parts. Here we have the setting parts laid out again. I think this is actually a clearer video. This screw right here. This is an additional screw that's only in the 321 and the CH versions of this. This goes back 50 years. It is just an additional screw that holds the setting components down. It's a very large head, and you will not find that in the 1861. That's about the only difference that you won't see as far as the setting components, or even on the dial train itself. All the parts, all the rest of the parts look the same. I'm not 100% certain if everyone's interchangeable, but they all look the same. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to put the winding stem in, and the one thing I want to show right here is we have the set lever. So when you go ahead and you hit your winding on the watch, when you're in the winding position, you feel your little ratcheting sound. When you pull it out, you hear a little crunch. You hear a little click. This is actually the setting lever right here. And what the setting lever does, it operates a few different things. It holds the stem in once the stem is in place, but it also has this little cam area right here is going to go ahead and push, and it's going to push the clutch wheel in and out through using the clutch lever. So we'll get to that in just a minute as I'm putting those setting components in. So that is and again, first thing it's going to do as we're right here, it's going to go ahead and hold everything together. I want to put the screw back in, and again, I'm using the proper screwdrivers for this. This watch is in amazing shape. I believe it's probably had one service in its lifetime, so I'm trying to give it the respect that it deserves. Using everything, everything's been fitted perfectly for it. So we just snug it up a little bit, and then we're going to go ahead. We have to actually loosen the set lever, allow the stem to go in, and then tighten it down again. And then everything's going to be secure on this side. And it's just, people ask the question all the time, why does a watch service cost so much? Well, you're seeing it in action. You're seeing exactly why the cost of a watch service, not just a restoration. We do this on every overhaul. This is more of a complex overhaul because of the age of the watch as well. So we have a lot more going on inside this watch. And we have our setting in place. And I actually have the train bridge is in place on that shot. The reason the train bridge is in place, it actually holds the setting parts from falling out. So the train is not in yet, but the train parts are. Again, it's a procedure. Not everyone assembles a watch the same way. There's no right, wrong way to do it. So I'm not going to say this is how you have to do it. This is how I do it. I'm not like other watchmakers, clearly. So it's something, that this is a technique and just a path that I've gone through. We've got a question from Bob Schaff. How can you eyeball the level of elaboration of a 2824 2892? Is it something a professional can do? A 2824 and a 2892, they're entirely different movements. You can tell without even opening the case just the way they wind. A 2824 has a much stiffer mainspring. And the first thing you see is the winding. It's just a very, very thick, hard wind on a 2824. A 2892 is it's a much thinner movement. It's design thin. I don't remember the millimeter specs offhand, but it's at least a millimeter thinner than a 2824. It's built differently. Both models have been around forever. They've been in different incarnations, different variations. But the 2824, to me, is a more robust movement. I always liked the 2824. I liked servicing it. It reminds me more of the Rolex 3035, just the way the construction is and everything. And it's not as robust as that, but it's still a very, very strong movement. It has a large balance. It has a large mainspring. It works. The problem with the 2824 is it's thick. It's quite thick, especially when you go putting modules on top of them. And I've only seen a few with modules on them. The 2892 is a much thinner movement, which allows the adaptation of putting modules on top of that watch. When you put modules on top, you want to watch the thickness. We have, a lot of people ask about the thickness of watches, why they're getting so thick. It's a lot of times because of complications. The more complications you put on the watch, when you add an automatic tool watch, you're adding a stack. You're stacking something on top of it. You put a calendar on, you're adding a layer on top of it. So everything you do, you're adding to the thickness of a watch. The 2892 is a very good movement. There's millions of them out there, millions. There's different classes of them. There's different grades. There's different finishes. I've seen some absolutely stunning finishes on 2892s that I've never seen in a 2824. I'm sure they're out there. I just never seen them. The 2892, again, parts are available for both, and they're actually being, now that all the problems with ETA, getting genuine ETAs, Sellita is actually making the Sellita 200, which is a 2824, Sellita 300, which is a 2892, and the parts are not interchangeable, but the movement itself is replaceable with the entire movement of the ETAs. So they're good movements. Both of them are. Go for the feel, though. Once you wind a 2824, you'll know it's a 2824 as compared to a 92, because all the 92s wind the same. Very smooth. I hope that helps. And with that, we're going to see where we're at here. We're going to try to continue on with the different parts of the CH27. We are going. Where are we at? Here we are. We're continuing on with the different parts on the dial side of the watch. And again, I stepped in here, I did this in segments, so we're kind of starting and stopping in different places. Jumped ahead. I'm not going to go into the chronograph parts of this watch. We're going to save that for an entirely different show, because that is a different show in itself, because again, talking about complications, that is a complete complication. So as soon as I can get a clear shot here, I'm going to go ahead and show you. I'm actually doing the train lubrication. And this is just different points. What you'll notice here is I don't have, on the train itself, I have the set bridge on, but I don't have the hour or the minute wheel in. The minute wheel is going to live right here, right underneath this set wheel post, or on top of the set wheel post, underneath the set lever. I don't have it in because I have to put the cannon pinion in. And the cannon pinion's right here. The cannon pinion is what the hour or the minute wheel goes on, hour wheel goes over it. And this is actually our hour wheel right here. Right there, that's our hour wheel. And it's going to go on top. And again, they call it the hour wheel. It makes a rotation. And that is what, every 12 hours, and that's what the hour hand actually goes on to. Right here, this is what the minute hand actually goes on to. And it's the cannon pinion, minute hand goes on it. And that's, it's as straightforward as it gets. The minute hand is a friction fit. The hour wheel itself is just, it's along for the ride. They're indicators. The gearing and hands are just indicators of how the power is being transmitted through the watch itself. So what I'm doing, though, is I'm going to go ahead and put the cannon pinion on. It's going to go on the center wheel post. We're going to lubricate below. We're going to lubricate the shaft and press it on. I don't want the minute wheel there because you run the risk of breaking one of the teeth on the minute wheel itself. And the minute wheel in this picture right here is sitting right here. So if this were here, it's brass. I'm slamming down a steel post. You can move it out of the way, but it's just not worth the danger. I'd rather do that, take the set bridge off, than put the setting parts in, especially on something as old as this. So we're going to put the cannon pinion on. There's a bunch of different ways to put them on. I do have support on the other side of this, and it's just going to snap right down. I've already checked the friction of this prior to tearing it down. That's part of the tear down when I'm not using the finger cuts, so I can feel everything. And now I'm taking the set bridge off, and you'll see the rest of the components go in. So I'll actually put the pieces in, the intermediate set wheels. We'll put the minute wheel in, and we'll put the rest of the setting components on this. So it's a little bit of forward, it's take a step back. And again, this is my procedure, this is how I do it. To me, there's no right, there's no wrong way to do it. The reason I actually put the set bridge on is because I wanted to be able to wind this watch. I want to be able to put some power to it. You can't get to the ratchet wheel on this. So it makes it so much easier to have the setting together, or the winding components together. Lubrication I'm using here, I'm using HP 9014. It's a high pressure grease oil. It's used for setting components. It's used for high pressure, for barrels, things like that. It's high pressure, low speed, so it's not a high speed lubricant. In your setting parts, you're not going to have high speed anyway. The only time you're actually using them is when you're setting. One thing I will point out, that's the minute wheel. These are the two intermediate posts, and this one's kind of interesting because that intermediate post that I just put, or that intermediate wheel that I just put in right here, is also the hub for our recorder hand. So the recorder hand actually comes through there, and that's the hub for it. So it's kind of a dual purpose. And then we'll put our other post on, then we'll go ahead and put the set bridge back on. Now when I talked about when we go into winding and we hear the little click noise, the click itself is actually the set lever, which is right here, and let's do that backwards. The set lever, which is right here, is a little pin on it. It's hitting the set lever bridge right there. And it's actually just riding in and out of a little finger. And if it's a 3 position, we'll have 3 notches. If you have a calendar, it'll go into the second notch. If it's just winding, it's on off. So you're either in winding or setting, either way. And that just holds it in place. So that's our set bridge. So we're going to go put the set bridge back on. And again, the lubricants I'm using such light lubricants. I don't want them spraying around. I don't want lubricants traveling all over the place. It's just, it makes for a very unhappy person, the next one that tears it down, because it shows bad workmanship. You should never see the lubricants. You shouldn't see lubricants anywhere on the watch except for inside the capsules. Screwdrivers are fit perfect again. The screws in this watch, like I said, they're perfect. So I don't want to damage anything here. We're just being ultra careful. Everything's by feel. The screws themselves, when you tighten a screw down, that's something else people ask about. How do you know how tight a screw is? You know how tight a screw is? It goes down. The screw has threads. And as the threads lock into each other, they actually stretch. So you're actually stretching the metal. When you tighten a screw down, you can start to feel the metal stretch a little bit. And it's knowing how tight to make that screw, because you could sure tear a head off a screw. We see broken screws all the time just from poor quality screws, but you can still, as you're putting a screwdriver or a screw together, you can still tear the heads off them. You could scratch them, you could slip, you could tear a half a screw off. So it's knowing how tight to make things. And again, this is all just part of the experience of just doing this hundreds and hundreds, thousands of times. And I'm checking the setting components right there. And right there I'm in winding, right there I'm in setting. And we can actually see the difference. We are in winding right here. This clutch lever, see if I can come back and do this like this. Our clutch lever right here is actually pushed back towards the stem, and all the wheels are engaged. That way the winding wheels are engaged. When we go back to the setting position, we pull it out. Yep, there's our winding there. You can see it move back. There's our setting position. When we go into the setting position, that clutch lever right here is pushed away. And it's moved everything towards the set wheels, all our setting wheels. So it engages everything inside the watch when you go into the setting. So when you're winding the watch, everything's pushed back towards the stem. When you're setting the watch, it pushes everything out. And again, you have to check all the functions of these watches. You have to make sure. We're in winding right there. I'm checking the smoothness. We're in setting right there. And I'm checking the smoothness. I'm checking the friction on the cannon pinion. When I'm into the setting position, even though I checked it before, I want to make sure we have freedom there. If we have too much tension on the cannon pinion, it can actually damage the different posts. And actually where the intermediate wheels are, it'll start tearing the metal off those posts just by having too much friction, by taking too much friction to actually set the watch. If we have too little, this is not as important in a chronograph, but in a calendar watch, it actually won't snap the calendar over. It'll come up to the calendar and the hands will actually slip, or the post, the center will actually slip inside the cannon pinion. So you have to have that happy medium. The way to check these, we don't have a hack on this watch, so the way I'm going to check the tension of the can and pinion once the whole watch is together is I'm going to go actually pull it into the setting position, and I'm going to turn backwards. I'm going to go reverse, and it should actually go ahead and stop the watch within 15 seconds. So we're going to go ahead and clear here. And here we are. And we're going to go into some lubrication on the dial side. We talk, I'd rather go back to that one because we're already running. So I don't want to do that. We're going to actually put some, or no, we're going to do the epiloom here. We talk about epiloom treatment. What is epiloom? Epiloom is, this is the epiloom. Epiloom is a treatment we put on different parts. Some watches require more epiloom than others in different parts. Where we're going to use the epiloom, we're going to use it on the pallet itself, just on the stones, and we're going to use the entire part on the escape wheel. There's different techniques, there's different ways to do this. Rolex had just come out with a full 15-minute video of how to epiloom, of how they want to do it. This is a technique that I was taught while I was at Omega. I love this technique because it's very, very clean. It does not get epiloom on the pinions itself. I'm only going to put it on the jewels. And the way I'm going to do it, some people use eyedroppers, I use the tweezers. And I'm actually going to insert the tweezer in and pull it out with the tweezers together. And when I hold it over the jewel, I'm going to open the tweezers up. I'm going to get a little bubble at the end of it, and it's going to flow right on top. And so I'm going to try really hard to demonstrate this and see if it, hopefully this shows out pretty good. You know, I'm going to watch this on the screen as well just to see how it turns out. And I'm actually going to open the tweezers right now. I'm going to get a bubble right at the end of it, and I'm just letting that bubble sit on top of that jewel. And it's just going to flow right on top of there. And epiloom, it evaporates very, very rapidly. So once you do the epiloom treatment, you're supposed to put a little bit of heat to it just to keep the condensation from causing any corrosion down the line. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to take the escape wheel itself and the entire escape wheel, and I'm going to go ahead and immerse it in the epiloom. And again, there's different ways to do this. A lot of times I'll use this bottle is about 3/4 used, so I actually use it from the bottle. Oh, there we go. I actually use it from the bottle. But if it's a new bottle, I actually pour it into a small one, and I do it that way. I do use wafers on occasion. You'll see me use that in a lot of my teardowns. A lot of the pictures I post, I'll put the pallet wheel and the escape wheel are cleaned in a wafer, but I don't use wafers to use the epiloom treatment. I'd rather do it this way. It's just, I can actually see what's going on then. I could see the epiloom go over. It just makes a very good application. One thing with the epiloom, what does it do? People hear about it. When first time I went to Switzerland, they asked me, can you oil without epiloom? And I said, I don't know, I've never tried. And they said, you know, I don't know if they were being serious or not, but they said epiloom was designed for American watchmakers that don't know how to lubricate. Well, after a day of trying, a day of practice, I was able to oil without epiloom. When you take the new OWME exam, one of the things they stress is lubricating without epiloom. Epiloom is a treatment that keeps the oil where you put it. It keeps it from spreading. So you put it on the pallet, you put it on the escape wheel, you have the two surfaces that ride together. You want to keep that lubrication there. We're going to put the pallet and escape wheel in. We're going to start that watch. We're going to let it run for a while, and it's actually going to wear a little groove where it's going to take the epiloom off of the pallet itself. So it's going to keep a high level of epiloom. It's going to keep a low one, and there's going to be nothing in the middle because it's been rubbed off. When we put the lubrication, it's going to stay where there's no epiloom. So we're going to use that epiloom on the top and bottom as a repellent, and it's going to keep the epiloom from rolling off, and it's going to keep it where we put it. So when we can take this watch apart in 2, 3, 4 years, it's going to have a line right across it. And I've seen this time and time again. I've done this experiment. It works. Being able to lubricate without epiloom, it's not difficult. I've done it. I don't do it as a practice because of the longevity of watches, of how they run. Again, you know, you hear different factions about that. You hear a lot of things. If you go to Switzerland, they don't use epiloom. There's no epilooms in the shops. You have to be able to lubricate without it. It's not difficult. It can be done. You get great results. So, you know, there's all kinds of trains of thought on that one. So we have the everything together. We are actually going to we're putting the train in here. I kind of backed up because I already had the epilogue treatment done. We're putting the train bridge together. Again, this is a 3/4 plate train bridge, so it's very difficult to get everything lined up. We're trying to get all the screws in. I actually want to get ahead because we get some very interesting things. We have an escape wheel bridge. The escape wheel itself is under its own bridge. We're going to go ahead and put the escape wheel in. And again, as I'm putting this together, I'm always checking for freedom. I checked it after it was pre-cleaned for all my end shakes. I didn't have to make adjustments on this watch. I did bring a video to show how to make adjustments on end shakes. We'll see if we get to that one on this show, or if not, it's going to be a later show, just making adjustments using the Horia tool. Selecting the right screws, is paramount. You have to put the right screws in the right holes. They're not all interchangeable. And especially this one, because actually that's the one oddball screw in this watch. That's it right there. It's the one oddball. So I'm actually I dump everything out and I'm just looking for the right screw. I don't separate everything. I was taught not to separate anything, to know what you're looking for, find it, and put it in. Then we're going to go ahead and put the screw in, and we're going to actually go ahead and jump forward and put the pallet in. I'm checking all end shakes. I'm checking freedom. I'm checking backlash. I'm going to put some power on it. There's no lubrication on this watch yet. So I'm putting some power on it. It's going to wind up and it's going to come back. So I'll see the escape wheel spin, and then all of a sudden it's going to come back. I want to see some backlash, and what that's showing me is freedom in the gear train. I haven't missed anything. I don't have any problems anywhere in that gear train. If you don't have any kind of backlash, you don't have freedom, then you're not going to have any amplitude. And we're putting the pallet in, and once the pallet is in, we're actually going to put some power on this watch. This is the pallet bridge. Again, everything is just being treated with the most delicate. One of the things I want to talk about at some point is the tweezers that I use. I use nickel tweezers, Bergeon nickel tweezers. I love them. I go through a couple pair a year, even though I refinish them. I love the sharp edge on them. They're great tweezers. I don't use them for my jewels. That I definitely want to demonstrate sometime, because there's a million different ways to oil balance jewels, and I have my own, and what I found works, and I like it, and it's again, different techniques, different roads to the same destination. We're going to go ahead and put the pallet bridge screws in, snug them down, and then we're going to put the balance in. And after we put the balance in, that's when we start checking things. Because as I spoke about on this watch has a fixed balance stud, and the regular does not have Edicron, so everything is fixed. There's different things we have to do. As soon as the balance drops in, engages, we get power. We have power on the watch. Again, there's no lubrication on this watch. That's not a problem. We're not letting it run for days on end. This watch came to life. It's fine. But we don't know if it's in beat. And when I talk about being in beat, I want to know, is the balance wheel oscillating in the directions both ways the same? And this is going to be done on the timing machine. And this is another demonstration we're going to show at one point. I want that balance wheel to be as even as possible. This adjustment has to be made on this watch a little differently. We have a fixed stud right here. It's a little triangle held in with a screw. This is non-adjustable. On modern watches, even the modern CH27 variants, it's adjustable. So it's very easy to pull that into beat as long as you're someplace close. On this, we actually have to turn the collet on the balance itself, which we're going to do here in a little bit. So I'm going to clear that. We're going to put it in. The watch is running. It has very good freedom. It has very good amplitude, even at low power. Again, I'm going to let this watch run 10, 15 minutes. When I take the balance out, that's when I'm going to lubricate the pallet stones. And we talk about that too. There's different ways to do your lubrication on your escapement. Apply to the escape wheel, apply to your pallet stones. I was taught originally apply to the escape wheel. I went to Switzerland. They wanted to apply to the pallet stones. Two different ways to do the same thing. As long as you get the right outcome, I don't see an issue with that. I'm checking freedom. I'm checking everything. And I'm going to go ahead and take this out, and I'm actually going to do the lubrication because I let the watch run for long enough. It's going to go ahead and scrape off that epilogue treatment. So we're going to take the balance back out again and get into actually some balance adjustments. And We're going to actually take I've already taken a reading, and I know that I'm actually out of balance right here. I'm going to have to turn this collet on the escape wheel, or on the balance wheel itself. So I hope I can demonstrate this clear enough here. What we have is we have a fixed stud right here, which means I can't physically turn that balance inside the movement. What I need to do is turn where the hairspring itself attaches to the balance staff. And that's a split collet. It's held on by friction. So I'm actually going to put a screwdriver between the collet and actually turn the collet and turn the balance. I'm going to hold the collet and actually turn the balance. It's extremely delicate. This is a Breguet overcoil. We have a little more room in there because of the Breguet overcoil. Oh my, I was just informed that the Paul Newman Daytona that I'm sure everybody has been following just sold for $15.5 million. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. We knew it was going to be north of 10 million, but 15.5, and I believe half of it went to charity. Is that what it was? Or I'm pretty sure half of the proceeds are going to charity. So the watch that gave the Daytona its name, the Paul Newman, sold for $15.5 million. Wow. That's unbelievable. Just unbelievable. I remember working on those watches 10 years ago. Not, of course, Paul Newman's, but I remember working on that watch. Actually, I've got a quick Paul Newman story. My sister's mother-in-law went out on a date with Paul Newman, and she said he was boring. So there's my quick Paul Newman story. I'm from Cleveland, Ohio originally. My sister still lives in Shaker Heights, and Betty Longo, who just passed away in the last year, shortly before my mother, same thing. She went out with Paul Newman. So that was a little story from that. We just talked about that at a wedding last summer. Amazing, amazing. I know we're running over here a little bit, so I want to go ahead. I want to finish up right here and just show how we're going to make these adjustments. I already know which way I'm going to turn my balance. I let power down on this, and I can actually see the balance is leaning one way by how the pallet fork is engaged. It's favoring one side. So what I'm going to do is I'm holding everything, and the turn I'm making is nothing you're going to see visible on a camera. It's so minute. It's just this tiniest of turns. I'm going to put it back in, and if I remember right on this watch, it took me about 3 or 4 tries before I got it right. But I ended up getting a beat error of 0, which is what I wanted. I wanted it as even as possible. 15.5 million, amazing. So I'm going to put it on a time machine right now because I actually have to see what that beat error is. And I'm sorry I couldn't pull back the camera on this to actually show all this. Is one of the things I wanted to do. We're going to do this on a later episode though. So I'm taking it out again. I'm making another adjustment. This is when we get into vintage watches. This is the kind of stuff we have to do. The hairspring's already centered. And when I say centered, I mean when I take the cap jewel out, that hairspring is, the balance is dancing right in the middle. All the weight of that hairspring is even all the way around it. So I know when I go to time this watch, unless it's really been butchered, and there's been holes drilled into the balance or anything, that it's going to be in poise. The hairspring is going to be in balance too, which I'm going to see a very small beat error in position. And when I talk about position, I talk about crown up, crown down, left and right. I want to see the smallest of beat errors in there, which means the hairspring isn't moving the balance itself out of beat. And it takes a lot of practice. It's not the easiest thing to do, especially on a vintage piece like this. And like I said, this one took me, I think, 3 times to actually get it, but I nailed the beat error on it, and I was just very happy. This watch just came out perfect. It has beautiful amplitude, and we haven't even filmed the chronograph part yet. We're actually waiting to do that. So I'm checking it one last time, and I know it's okay, and that's, we're getting in there. I wanted to open this up. This is regulation. We're on the time machine right here. The watch is already pulled into beat. So the watch is running. I'm letting everything stabilize. As the watch stabilizes, the rate's going to come down. Amplitude's going to go up as everything kind of balances itself out. So I'm going to let the watch run for quite a bit. Again, everything's lubricated here already on both sides. I'm getting very good amplitude. I have very good freedom of everything. I have to regulate the watch though. One of the things, again, this watch does not have Etikron. We have a single adjuster, a single rate adjuster, which is right here. Excuse me. Which is right here. As it advances and retards it. The way it advances and retards it, it either shortens or lengthens the hairspring. As you shorten the hairspring, if I pull this down, if I go away from the movement center, it's going to effectively shorten that hairspring, because the converse side is it's going to push the stud, the regulating pins, into the movement. As it pushes into the movement, it's pushing away from the stud, and it's effectively shortening the hairspring. Conversely, if we want to slow this watch down, I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to push the regulator into the movement. It's going to push the regulator pins away from the movement, closer to the stud, effectively lengthening the hairspring, giving more travel to it. That's how the rates adjusted on this. Again, we have timing screws. The timing screws are to get the initial timing on this. They're not used in regulation. I want this watch regulated. I want everything dead center. If I have to, I'll go in, I'll repoise everything. But this watch was just so clean, I know I'm not going to have any problems with that. I'm going to regulate the watch, and it's just very, very slight movements. And as I'm doing this, everything's by feel. I'm looking at the regulator. Once I have the tweezers on the regulator, I'm looking up at the machine, which I have directly behind me. So I'm taking my readings off the machine as I'm doing everything. I'm going to go ahead and check in position. I want to know if my banking pins are tight enough. The banking or the regulating pins will actually, the hairspring will vibrate between them. If they're too narrow, the rate's going to go up in a sideways position. If the gap is too large, the watch will drastically slow down. So the regulating pins are used to regulate in position. The way to adjust regulating pins on this one is actually bend them. Again, no Edicron here. So I'm trying to get a good average right here. I ended up getting a very good delta out of this watch. Delta is a split between our fastest and lowest rates. It just turned out really, really well. And we'll get the rest of them. And I think I was just taking the final readings here. And for the most part, that's the base assembly of the CH27. There's so much more that goes into this movement. We just have a 3-hand watch right now. We have an hour hand, we have a minute hand, and we have a second hand that runs off the 4th wheel. That's all we have. We're going to go in further. We're going to go do the chronograph. We're going to reassemble that chronograph and make the chronograph adjustments. That's going to be very interesting. I'm really excited to be able to do that. Hope to be able to shorten that down a little bit too as we do it. People ask, at the same time, people ask me, what do I wear? What am I wearing tonight? Well, because of our guest we're going to have in the next show, I actually brought my 1965 Navitimer. And I popped the case on this one so we can actually see the case back. And this is the gorgeous, gorgeous Venus movement, the Venus 178. Well, back in the 60s, the movements were copper plated. They were just absolutely stunning. And that is an amazing camera shot. Great job. That's just absolutely beautiful. But again, 3-hand. If I could show real quick, I can even show in this. This is so sweet. I can show the column wheel actually functioning. You can see the column wheel, the whole lever, start-stop lever that wraps all the way around. And the start-stop lever has a finger that actually pulls the column wheel that we've talked about. And that's our column wheel in action. And you can actually, wow, this is great, because you can actually see the coupling lever right here. It'll actually drop in to the center. Right there, it just dropped down, and our chronograph is running. It lifted out. That's great camera work. And when we're turned off, we can go ahead and reset everything. I talked about the column wheel. We can't reset while it's running, because the hammer itself will not drop down because the column wheel actually holds it up. Oh, that's just freaking great. I love that. Absolutely love that. That's a new camera. I didn't even know we had it tonight, and going to look really forward to being able to use that in future episodes. With that, I want to thank everybody for watching. I know I ran over. I hope everyone kind of stuck through, or they pick up the show somewhere. Send me your comments. Send me what you want to see. Send me your questions. I'll do my best to answer them. If you want to send Breitling questions for the next week or next show, that would be great. And I really have a lot of fun doing this. I really enjoy it, and I want to keep doing this. As long as we have, to keep building the interest. It's just been going crazy. So let's keep this going. And with that, cheers, and I'm out.